Okay, so that's the Clover desktop. So it's the designer which runs. In this case, that was running everything on my laptop here. So you can build those graphs, run them without any need to connect to a server of any sort. However, if you want to increase your flexibility and your performance, you then would look to move to the server product, which is the next one in the product line. And the best way of showing this really is to just quickly pop in and have a look here at the server interface. So here we're running. We've installed the Clover server, which, by the way, is also totally platform independent, and I can monitor a variety of things. So I can look at the status of our cluster, for instance, memory. There's all sorts of little details for people who like dashboards and lots of facts and figures. We can view the execution history, so I can see which jobs have run. We can look at what are called sandboxes. So these are rather like file systems on your server. So if you want to put data into specific file locations on your server, you can do that, or you can point the whole server to a shared file system, for instance. User and group management, so you can control access and execution of graphs properly. We can also launch services. So if we've designed a graph using the designer, as I just showed you, and then we deploy that to our server, we can launch things manually. So here, for instance, we've got a graph which I can test. So I just quickly run that. And this is actually asking me for a parameter even. So I'll now execute it. And it's already run. This is run very quickly, and it just gives me a list of all the mountains greater than 8,000 meters. So we can launch services from here. Just go back. Very important point is scheduling. So we can schedule all sorts of tasks. We can, for instance, if we click here, you'll see how we can schedule emails to be sent out, graphs to be executed, graphs to be interrupted, things to be archived. And we can monitor the tasks that have already run, so tasks history. And then another important point is we can set up so-called graph listeners. So what happens, for instance, if a graph fails to complete properly? So a graph event listener will allow us to say, well, if a particular graph doesn't complete, then send an email to the administrator, or if a graph does complete, maybe feed the data into the next graph. So it sort of allows you to do workflow type stuff. Then file event listeners would allow us to point the server to a particular area on your file system, and if a file or a batch of files appears in there, that will automatically trigger those files to be processed. So that's, I think, just enough to give you a flavor of the server product. So I shall go back to my presentation here and talk now about the Clover cluster. So this is obviously a very exciting new product that Clover have brought out, and I think that this really does take it to the level where, as I said, you can scale in many cases near linearly, and that has obviously many benefits. You can increase your processing power. You can run transformations in parallel over multiple servers in the cluster. Added benefits are fault tolerance. And the extra flexibility you get by being able to dynamically reconfigure nodes by adding them or removing them on the fly. So this image at the bottom here shows a cluster of 3 nodes, and they can read data from one very large file, for instance, and the system will automatically work out how much of the file each of those nodes should reach. So the first node will grab the first third of the file, the second node the second third, and so on. So it will read effectively in parallel from that file. It will then process in parallel, and then it can write the data out also in parallel. So it's very, very easy to set up. We'll be looking at a graph in just a second. You set that up through the same Clover designer that we've just looked at.